Hello everyone. Today we're going to step into the heart of rural Tennessee, not through a gentle morning mist or the rustle of cornfields, but through a scream that never quite faded. Imagine a quiet land, rich with promise and new beginnings, where settlers dreamt of peace, but instead found their lives consumed by a mystery so dark, it still sends chills down spines 2 centuries later. You may not know, but the facts show. More than 100 eyewitnesses reported the phenomena known as the Bell Witch. That's not folklore, that's testimony. Let's begin where all great tragedies do, with hope. When John Bell and his wife Lucy packed up their modest life in North Carolina in 1804, their eyes were set on the Red River area of Tennessee, a wild, untouched stretch of land just beginning to attract pioneers. They arrived with dreams, grit, and enough determination to turn virgin soil into a thriving homestead. And they did. In just over a decade, the Bell family built wealth, gained influence, and became one of the most respected households in the region. But with each acre they claimed, they unknowingly sowed something much darker. Could the seeds of success ever be so poisoned? At the same time, another family from North Carolina was making their own way west, the Batts family. Initially cordial, the Batts and Bells exchanged pleasantries at church, nodded respectfully at market. But below that surface tension grew, brittle and ready to snap. When Frederick Batts was gravely injured in an accident, the economic freefall was swift. He sold land to John Bell, and Kate Batts, his iron-willed wife, believed the deal was rigged. She accused John of exploiting their suffering, a charge that stung more than just pride. Was it merely a financial dispute, or did Kate know something deeper? Kate's rage was no passing anger. She called it injustice. She called it betrayal. And some say she called on something else entirely. Her behavior grew increasingly erratic, yelling during sermons, shouting strange phrases, even pacing the graveyard in the dead of night. Was this grief? Or had Kate Batts opened a door she could no longer close? Around 1816, the rift widened with another failed transaction involving a young enslaved girl. Tempers flared, accusations flew, and Benjamin Batts, the girl's seller and Kate's brother-in-law, sued John Bell for fraud. The case proceeded without Bell's knowledge, resulting in a judgment against him. Worse, the church excommunicated him. The once proud patriarch stood disgraced before a community he had helped build. But perhaps even more terrifying, some believed this humiliation marked the beginning of a curse. Is it possible that public disgrace attracts private horrors? By 1817, the curse, or whatever it was, began to take shape. While hunting on his own land, John encountered a creature that should not exist, a black-furred beast with the body of a dog and the head of a rabbit. He fired his gun, but the creature vanished. No footprints, no blood, nothing. Bell told no one. But the silence didn't last long. Soon tapping noises began around the house, then scratching, then dragging sounds, like something heavy being hauled across wooden planks. The family investigated every corner of the farm, finding nothing but the growing fear in their eyes. Was this all in their heads, or had something truly followed them home? Then the attacks turned personal. John's daughter, 14-year-old Elizabeth, called Betsy, was the first to suffer physical harm. One night she woke to find her hair tied in knots around her bedpost. Before she could scream, an invisible force struck her across the face, hard enough to leave red welts. The family ran to her room but could do nothing. As the nights dragged on, Betsy was not alone. Her siblings began waking with bruises, their faces scratched as if clawed by a wild animal. What kind of evil haunts a family's dreams and leaves fingerprints? Desperate, John confided in James Johnston, a respected neighbor and close friend. James and his wife spent the night at the Bell farm, hoping to debunk the rumors. Instead, they heard the noises, felt the chills, and witnessed the same torment. They urged John to go public, to seek help, but John feared ridicule, humiliation, and the complete ruin of his family's name. Would you have the courage to tell the world your house was haunted? Eventually, word spread, and with it came visitors, curious neighbors, ministers, skeptics, even thrill-seekers, each one hoping to debunk the mystery, and each one leaving with a story they couldn't explain. But the more attention the haunting received, the more powerful it seemed to become. No longer satisfied with knocks and whispers, the entity began to speak, in full sentences, in different voices, mocking, laughing, accusing. And through it all, one thing became clear. It hated John Bell. But why? That question, more than any, fueled the growing obsession surrounding the Bell farm. As the witch's powers grew, she began answering questions about people's lives, secrets no stranger could possibly know. She mimicked voices, she predicted events, and still, her wrath stayed focused on John Bell and his daughter Betsy. Were they cursed for their past, or was something in the present keeping this force alive? As rumors swirled and fear mounted, one name entered the fray that changed everything. General Andrew Jackson. A man of war, a future president, Jackson had no patience for superstition. When he heard of the Bell Witch, he laughed. Then he saddled up and rode to Red River, bringing a small troop and a soldier boasting silver bullets. But as Jackson's wagon approached the Bell property, it froze in place. The horses refused to move. The wheels wouldn't budge. Then came a sound, light, mocking, childlike laughter drifting across the field. Jackson, recognizing the danger, whispered an apology aloud to the unseen presence, and the wagon began to move again. What did a seasoned general see that day which made him bow his head in fear? Jackson stayed only one night. That was all it took. His men, some of whom had faced cannons and bayonets, reported voices in the dark, ghostly figures, icy drafts in sealed rooms. By morning, Jackson reportedly said he'd rather face the British again than spend another night under the Bell Witch's roof. If a war hero fled in fear, what does that tell us about what lurked in Red River? The winter of 1820 fell over Red River like a death shroud. The crops had withered, the sun had lost its warmth, and within the Bell home shadows seemed to stretch longer than the days themselves. But the deepest cold of all lived in John Bell's bones. The man who once strode confidently across his land now moved like a phantom of himself. Eyes sunken, hands trembling, mind drifting in and out of fog. But curiously, the only person untouched by the fear and wrath of the Bell Witch was Lucy Bell. Why had the spirit chosen to spare her? As Lucy fell ill with pleurisy, a condition that often proved fatal, the rest of the family prepared for the worst. Yet strangely, as fever twisted her body in agony, the torment within the house paused, for her. A soft voice began to sing hymns beside her bed. Grapes and nuts, fresh and ripe, in the middle of a barren winter, appeared beside her pillow. Where others were beaten and bruised, Lucy was nurtured. The same spirit who scratched and slapped her children now played nursemaid to the dying matriarch. Was it compassion, favoritism, or something else altogether? The blessing for Lucy seemed to coincide with John Bell's collapse. He grew unresponsive, often sitting for hours staring at the same spot on the wall. At night, his seizures grew so violent that he would bite through his own tongue. No doctor could explain it. No medicine could ease it. On the morning of December 20th, 1820, John Bell was found dead in bed. But what they discovered beside his still body sent shockwaves through the family. A small vial of cloudy liquid, sharp-smelling, pungent. They had never seen it before. The moment they opened it, a familiar voice filled the room. "I fixed his medicine last night. I gave him a big dose. He'll never get up again." It was the voice of the Bell Witch. With those words, history was made. John Bell became the only person in American history whose death was officially blamed on a supernatural force. Some whispered that it was murder by poison, someone in the family seeking revenge or release. But the supernatural confession left everyone stunned. Could a ghost really kill a man? Following John's burial, the atmosphere in the house shifted. The torment that had become part of daily life ceased. The laughter disappeared. The bruises faded. The farm felt normal. It seemed at last the spirit had taken what it wanted and moved on. But this was not the end. It was merely a breath before the next storm. In the spring of 1821, Betsy Bell found reason to smile again. She accepted the proposal of Joshua Gardner, a kind, hard-working young man admired by the community. But almost immediately after the engagement, strange things began to stir once more. Betsy encountered a childlike figure in the woods, a pale girl in a green frock, standing alone, gazing silently. Then it vanished. Could this be a warning? Whispers returned. Soft at first, then more insistent. Do not marry Joshua. Betsy was once again being targeted, not with violence this time, but with emotional devastation. Her dreams turned to nightmares, her joy curdled into dread. Unable to withstand the constant spiritual pressure, she broke off the engagement. Her suitor left town heartbroken. Did the spirit act out of jealousy, protection, or was it just hungry for more despair? Richard Powell, Betsy's former teacher and a man much older than she, had always shown an interest in her. Even while married, his gaze lingered too long, his words too flattering. When his wife passed away soon after Betsy ended her engagement, many began to murmur. Powell, they said, was a man of books, psychology, illusion. A man who could manipulate minds and moments. Did he orchestrate the entire haunting to control the girl he desired? Or was it Kate Batts all along? Here's where things take an even darker turn. Lucy Bell, the family matriarch, was the sister of John Williams, Jr., who was Kate Batts's father. That means Lucy and Kate were closely related. If the Bell Witch was a curse from Kate, why would she spare Lucy? Unless, of course, the haunting was an inside job. Could the women have conspired against John for reasons no one dared to speak aloud? There are still people arguing about the event. One camp believes it was all supernatural. Another insists it was human trickery. A third group says the truth is somewhere in between. But regardless of the theory, the legacy was carved into Red River soil. As the years passed, Betsy eventually married and moved away. The house fell into silence, and the stories turned to legend. But not everyone forgot. Decades later, descendants of the Bell family reported strange happenings. Footsteps, objects moving on their own, voices echoing through the hallways. Could the entity have ever truly left? Bob Bell, a great-grandson, recounted a moment from his youth when the family's china cabinet opened in the dead of night, and plates scattered across the floor, yet none broke. Not one. As if a spirit still roamed but no longer filled with rage. Maybe curiosity. Maybe something else. One more story stands out. Tim Henson, a local historian, warned tourists never to remove anything from the Bell property. One man ignored the warning and took a small stone from the Bell Witch Cave. Within days, he lost his job, his marriage, and eventually his home. Coincidence? Or a reminder that the spirit still watches? What makes the Bell Witch so unique is not just the volume of witnesses or the presence of historical figures like Andrew Jackson. It's the sheer complexity of the story. Betrayal, love, revenge, and possibly murder. Was it supernatural? Psychological manipulation? A cover-up for a deeper crime? Or all of them at once? Even today, visitors to Adams, Tennessee report feelings they can't explain. Goosebumps in broad daylight, disembodied whispers during tours, sudden nausea in the middle of the Bell family fields. What is it about this land that refuses to forget? One thing is certain. Something happened in Red River. Something that changed the lives of everyone who came close. And perhaps something that's still waiting in the silence. What do you think? If it was you, would you have stayed another night? Years slipped by like autumn leaves drifting across the Red River. But the shadow of the Bell Witch never completely vanished. Time dulled the rawness of memory, turned screams into whispers, turned fear into folklore. But the questions never stopped. For those who lived it, the haunting wasn't a ghost story. It was a wound that never quite healed. And for those who heard it afterward, the story took on a life of its own, changing slightly with each telling, like a mirror reflecting 1,000 faces. But could the Bell Witch have been more than just a legend passed from lips to firelight? In the decades following John Bell's death, Red River, now Adams, became a quiet, uneventful town. But not completely. Local children dared one another to approach the Bell Witch Cave, a limestone hollow said to be the spirit's lair. Tourists began to appear, drawn by the promise of a real ghost story. They carried away trinkets, stones, fragments of wood, sometimes just to say they had, other times in defiance. And yet many of them returned those items by mail, accompanied by trembling letters detailing misfortune. Broken bones, lost jobs, broken marriages. Was the spirit still exacting its toll? One woman, a teacher from Kentucky, recounted how a stone from the cave seemed to follow her. Doors in her house slammed shut. Shadows moved in corners where there was no light. Her dog refused to enter the room where the stone was kept. After weeks of torment, she returned the stone with a note. "I'm sorry. I believe you now." The museum in Adams still houses letters like hers, testimonies that feel eerily similar to what the Bells once faced. But they also fuel another question. What if the haunting wasn't limited to one house, one family, one decade? What if the spirit was attached to something older, something deeper in the soil of Tennessee itself? This theory has gained traction among modern researchers. Some believe the Bell Witch wasn't a person at all, but a spirit tied to the land, a force awakened by the violence and betrayal that stained it. Native American burial sites are known to have existed near the Bell property, and desecration of sacred ground is a theme that repeats in many global hauntings. Could the Bells' misfortunes have stemmed not from Kate Bat's rage, but from a more ancient wrath? Still, others remain focused on the human angle. The relationships within the Bell family were complex, and not all of them were healthy. Richard Powell, Betsy's former teacher and eventual husband, remains one of the most mysterious figures in the entire tale. He was highly educated, fluent in multiple languages, well-read in psychology and philosophy, and rumored to be skilled in stagecraft. Some argue Powell used his knowledge to manipulate Betsy, possibly using hidden devices or even hypnotic suggestion to create the illusion of a haunting. After all, Powell had motive. He was obsessed with Betsy. And when his wife conveniently died in the same year Betsy canceled her engagement to Joshua Gardner, suspicions naturally rose. Could Powell have orchestrated the supernatural events to isolate Betsy, make her emotionally vulnerable, and eventually steer her back to him? There are still people arguing about this point in online forums, local coffee shops, and ghost hunter documentaries. The Powell theory divides believers and skeptics alike. On one hand, it offers a rational explanation. On the other, it undermines the hundreds of independent accounts that describe experiences far beyond human manipulation. Even stranger still are the generational echoes. Some descendants of the Bell family have reported ongoing disturbances, flickering lights, phantom footsteps, sudden cold spells. Others speak of dreams in which the witch returns not as a monster, but as a warning. These dreams often carry a cryptic message: the debt isn't paid. Which raises a chilling possibility. If the haunting was revenge, is it truly over? The most unnerving aspect of the Bell Witch legend may not be the slapping or the voices or the fatal poison. It's that even after centuries, people still report experiences that mirror the original tale. Tim Henson, the town historian, swears that some visitors leave the Bell Cave pale and shaking. Some have fainted. Others have been scratched by unseen hands. Tim himself once heard his name whispered while he stood alone, deep in the cave, flashlight flickering. No one else around. When he turned, there was nothing but stone and silence. Was it all imagination? Or was something watching him from the shadows? And then there's the case of the family that moved into the property in the 1960s. They kept to themselves but left abruptly after only 6 months. No for sale sign. No explanation. A neighbor later claimed he heard the family screaming in the middle of the night. He knocked, waited, and eventually left. The next day, the house was empty. What could make a family abandon their home overnight? Perhaps the scariest part of the Bell Witch story isn't what happened, but what still might. If the witch was real, and not a myth, not a metaphor, then she remains one of the only supernatural forces in recorded history, to not only speak, interact, and harm, but to kill. And if she killed once, who's to say she won't again? So here's where the legend folds back onto itself. Every generation retells the Bell Witch tale a little differently. For some, it's a warning against greed or betrayal. For others, it's a story of love gone wrong. And for a few, those who have felt the icy breath, heard the knock at midnight, or seen a shadow where none should fall. It is a living, breathing force. Not a legend, not a metaphor, but something else entirely. Do you believe in curses passed down through bloodlines? In spirits that outlive centuries? If so, you might want to think twice before visiting Adams, Tennessee. Because one thing is for sure, something happened in that quiet place, something that won't be buried. Not by time, not by reason, and certainly not by disbelief. As we drift away from the candlelit corridors of the Bell homestead and let the whispers settle into silence, one truth remains. Stories like these aren't just about ghosts. They're about memory, about mystery, and the haunting possibility that some questions will never be answered. The tale of the Bell Witch began with a family, ordinary, hopeful, and deeply human. It stretched across generations, invited presidents and professors into its shadow, and left a trail of fear that still clings to Tennessee's red earth. Was it revenge, born of injustice and bitterness? Was it love twisted into obsession? Or was it something much older? An echo of a land disturbed, a warning never meant to fade. Whether you believe the Bell Witch was a grieving relative, a cunning manipulator, or an ancient force guarding sacred ground, one thing is undeniable. Something unforgettable took place. And whatever it was, it saw, it listened, it acted. Then, it waited. And maybe, it's still waiting. As you close this chapter and return to your world of logic, lights, and safe explanations, consider this. Thousands of people heard it, saw it, feared it, and hundreds still visit that quiet town with quiet questions. If you stood in the Bell Witch Cave, alone, could you keep your courage? Would you still say it was just a story? Whatever you believe, keep an eye on the shadows. And the next time you hear a knock at your door late at night, ask yourself if it's truly the wind. Until next time, sleep well. And remember to leave the stones where you found them.